There's nothing more enticing to a furniture flipper and refinisher than free furniture. And on today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you a fun and very challenging free furniture flip that I found on Facebook Marketplace. This vintage dresser made in 1970 has certainly seen better days. The top part seemed like it was a bit moldy and had deteriorated over time. There was hardware pieces missing, the drawers were a little bit stiff to pull, but I didn't know that at the time when I picked it up. So I brought it home and discovered all these fun quirks later on. And this video is all about the challenges and how I refinished and made over this dresser for a profit. So if you want to see this transformation, continue watching. When I saw this free vintage dresser on Facebook Marketplace, I jumped at the chance to collect it. Even though I did see this stain, I did think that it would be possible to sand out. And this is the first step I'm going to tackle in this free dresser makeover. So I'm first starting with an 80 grit sandpaper, and I'm just making sure to go quite gently over the top of this varnish. It is quite flaky, so it did come off super easy. And coming over this damage stained area, I made sure to go over about maybe 3 times with the 80 grit just to really get down and into those cracks and grains to remove any dirt and grime. And this worked really well. So you can see the before, and here is it after. With the top now sanded, I'm moving on to the edges, and you can see that it's quite flaky. So all I'm doing is using some leftover sandpaper from my sanding pad and just going around the edges. And I can tell you, this was not an enjoyable experience. If you happen to have one of these sanders, this would definitely be the place to use it. But as I only have an orbital sander, I did this by hand. I possibly could have used paint stripper for this dresser, but I don't like the mess that it entails when having to set up and use a stripper. I do find sanding a lot easier, and this piece really tested my ability and patience in sanding. Due to the condition of this dresser, I had to make sure that I sanded every single surface. So that was the front drawers, the sides, the base. This definitely took a long time to sand, and is probably by far the longest piece I've sanded entirely on. And here is the finished result after about 3 hours. So it's looking pretty good. I'm actually really happy with how it's come out. It has removed all that flaky varnish and stain, and is now a great surface for me to start adding some colour. Here I'm just testing out a swatch that I've made of Fusion's Bellwood and pairing it with my hardware piece that I think I might be using. Sometimes I like to do this to just test out and visualize the color and the scheme together before I start. And though I like the color, I'm not too sure on the hardware and the combination of where I'll be putting this color yet. So I'm just using this as a visualization tool, and then once I get to the color, I'll sort of play around with where I might place this. But the first thing I need to do is prime this dresser. So I'm using the primer here to make sure that I block out any bleed through. Here is the top surface after one coat, so you can still see that there's quite a bit of bleed through coming through. So I'm just going to let that dry and then paint on a second coat. I did end up doing about 3 coats of the primer on the top surface and 2 on the sides. And now we get to the fun part, colour. Here I'm using Fusion's Bellwood, and it's such a fun paint to use. It applies and just rolls on like butter, and this paint is a joy to work with, and I absolutely adore this colour. And here we are at the midway point. So I've painted the base, and now I'm going to soften the rawness of the front drawers by making a whitewash finish. And I'm just using some white chalk and thinning this down with water. and then just applying this on the raw front drawers and then wiping off the excess. So I'm doing this whitewash to add a bit of warmth but to reduce the yellowing of the raw timber. And here is the piece in this finished combination. So I'm loving the color, but I'm not loving this intensity of all the drawers having the whitewash. I'm finding it a bit overwhelming. So what I'm going to do is leave the first 2 drawers in that whitewash and then paint all the other drawers down in the Bellwood color, just to give it a bit more contrast and reduce the intensity of this finish. I can move on to adding in the wax. I love using this Gillies wax as it is so easy to apply and it really gives a lovely finish and is really durable. Once this dresser has been waxed, I'll let this cure for a few days to make sure it sets. The last step to revitalise this vintage dresser is just to apply some hemp oil in the drawer sliders and on the back end of the drawers as well. So let's take a look at what this free vintage dresser looked like before. So let's talk numbers and the difficulties I faced in this furniture flip. So pretty much the main costings for this flip were down to the sanding pads that I used. The sanding pads all up probably cost me about $25 for this. And I updated this vintage dresser with a lovely ceramic hardware piece from my own collection called the Odyssey. And this one's called Zeus, and this one cost $8 each. So I used 10 pieces of these and it was $80 all up. So in total, my costings for this flip were $105. So not bad. So let's talk difficulties that I faced. Now this piece took so much more sanding than I had anticipated or that I would have liked. I think probably all up it maybe took about 3 hours in total to sand from the 80 grit down to the 240 grit. And then I had to prime this piece so many times to make sure that there was no bleed through and that this helped give a really protective surface for the fusion paint to adhere to. So that took a lot more time than I would have liked. And then it also came to the end listing. Originally, I had listed this dresser for $450 in the original state that you had seen in my reveal. So after consultation and having this piece listed on Marketplace for a few days with no takes and interest, I decided to paint those front drawers in the same color just to make sure it was all clean and even and just a bit more modern and updated. I did this because the front drawer texture and the whitewash was probably a bit more of a contrast and maybe a bit polarizing for some people. So I decided to just make it clean and simple and just paint it all one color. And I have this currently listed now for $350 and still no takers, but if there's no response on this in another week, I probably will drop it for $300, and that will still give me a decent profit, but not as much as I'd like. But you can never predict the marketplace, and that's one of the beauties and challenges of selling on Facebook Marketplace. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel to see what I end up selling this piece for. And on my next video, I have another free flip, and this one's going to be a fun roadside find. So stay tuned for that video. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.